The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Yes, well, hello. Welcome to Lessons Learned by the Practice Growth Masters, where we ask the question, could your law firm survive without you? My name is Jeff Hines. I am one of the client service advisors for Atticus. Before we begin, if I could just give a little bit of basic background info about the company. So Atticus was founded in 1989 to provide in-depth ongoing support and accountability programs for lawyers and law firms that will effectively increase gross revenues and personal incomes, reduce stress and the number of hours in the office, develop greater career satisfaction, and allow more time for family and personal interests. If you've ever attended a Practice Builder or Double Your Revenue workshop and later realized you could benefit from further help implementing change in your practice, the best way to accomplish your goals would be to qualify for enrollment in our Practice Growth Program, which meets quarterly for 2 days. If you haven't attended a workshop and want to foster growth of your practice, we highly recommend starting with a Practice Growth Diagnostic. For further information, contact hello@atticusadvantage.com. So through the course of this interview, there's a few ways that you can make your comments or questions known, and we do encourage you to do that. If we don't get to your question, we will follow up with you after the presentation. The first option you've got, though, is to use the chat function on your GoToWebinar dashboard to send a message to the event organizer, myself. If you would like your question to remain anonymous, simply indicate so in your message. Or you could click the hand icon to indicate you have a question or comment, and I'll call on you. If I do that, I'll unmute you so that you can be heard. So today's presenter or interviewer is attorney and practice advisor Steve Riley. Steve focuses on a limited number of top producing attorneys that are committed to taking their practices to new levels of excellence, profit, and personal success. In addition to advising attorneys on growing their practices, Steve actively continues to practice himself. He's written 7 books, won a national award for practice innovation, and wrote a national column on practice management. Our guest today is attorney James Joseph. James is one of Long Island's top matrimonial attorneys. He founded his practice in 1998 to serve business owners and professionals. Today, the Joseph Law Group has 5 attorneys and practices solely in divorce and family law. Its founder serves on the Nassau County Bar Association's Board of Directors and the New York State Bar Association's Matrimonial Committee and Family Law Committee. James also serves in several roles with his local chapter of the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. If there was anything else to add, I would say to minimize your distractions, close the blinds if you've got them, perhaps mute your phone, turn off your email program just for this hour. I promise you James's story is quite compelling, and you'll find it inspirational. With that, I'll hand it over to Steve and James. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Jeff. Welcome, everyone. Welcome. I have been looking forward to today's interview and lessons learned webinar from the point in time that we asked James to do this. This is one of the most fabulous and compelling stories that I've ever heard from a practice viewpoint. We all know lawyers make differences for clients. We all know that we can really contribute to the lives of our clients. But rarely do you have the opportunity for a lawyer such as James at his level to contribute to other lawyers. So you have this really great opportunity today to listen to a story of a gentleman that not only built a very successful practice, but actually built a practice with an intentional goal of being able to be out of the practice for about a 6-month period, and now has gotten to a point where he's able to practice and run a very successful practice, in a way that allows him to focus on other areas of his life. But I'm not going to steal the thunder. I want you to hear the story from him and really appreciate what he's achieved and what he's accomplished. And at the same time, be aware that he's been working with our company for a significant period of time. So as you listen to the story and what he's done, I will ask him things about where was he at certain stages in his thinking, stages of his life, stages of his practice growth. And as we do the presentation, this is not going to be a classic PowerPoint presentation where we have certain talking points. You know, he's such a fantastic guy and he's got a fantastic story and a fantastic life. We're going to actually have some photos that we've accumulated from him that he tells me that he has not reviewed prior to the webinar but has reviewed in the past. You'll see his beautiful wife Elsa and his two daughters Emma and Maggie on some of the photos, just because this has got such you know, it's really, quite frankly, what we do for a living. We make a difference for our clients in order to make a difference for our family. So I think it makes the most sense to have his family as the star, part of the star of the presentation. So with that, James, welcome to the call, welcome to the webinar, and thanks for doing that. I really, really appreciate it.
You're welcome, and thank you for that that incredibly flattering introduction. I realize I'm glad we're capturing this, because I think my wife and children appreciate me, but that was I'm a fairly modest guy, and I don't hear things like that often enough. So I'm going to save that and pass it on to the family.
You should. You should.
Thank you, and I truly, you know, if in my story, and I know that there is some motivation for other people, I couldn't be happier to share it. I don't think that I have any, you know, special gifts over any other lawyer, other than the gift of kind of having been forced into making some you know, important, crucial moves earlier in my career than I might otherwise have, and finding, of course, the right guidance and the right people to steer me in the direction that I needed to go. So, happy to be here.
Yeah, so it's well, two things about that. Thank you. And one of the things that people usually, whenever you talk at one of our programs and you share your story, people are always profoundly impacted, because most people don't see what you've been through as a blessing. They wouldn't see that. And you are one of the guys that really has built a very, very high level, successful matrimonial level practice, you know, at a very high level. And at the same time, it's still remarkably modest. I make a joke. I really say that it's really remarkable to me that as some of the lawyers' incomes grow, their IQ grows and their modesty seems to be extinguished with it. And you're one of the few guys I've known that as his income and success has grown, has become more and more modest. It's fascinating to watch. It's one of the things that makes you just terrific to talk to. So our topics today. Our topics really are going to be fourfold. Number one is lessons from the Practice Growth Masters, and that's really talking to James today. Two, we're going to have a brief conversation for those of you that don't know how we work, how some of our programs work, and you'll hear James talk every now and then about a few things. The three, we'll have a quick test towards the end of the call on, are you coachable? Like, how do you know? And then we'll end with our most important recommendation for the call. So let's go back. And the goal of this really, and James, you know, we're kind of giving some serious foreshadowing about it, but as you listen to this story and you listen to the strategies that James employed, he had a significant, compelling reason to make change. And as you listen to this, I want you to start asking yourself, you know, where do I have a compelling enough reason to implement some of the changes and some of the things that James did in his life? So let's talk. So you start your practice. We started practicing back in 1998, and let's talk just briefly before you joined Atticus. And we have this wonderful photo of the attorneys on your team today. But before we introduce them, let's talk about where you were at back when you started your own practice, because you were an associate for a couple of years at a family law firm, and then you set up your own practice. So let's just talk for a minute or two what was going on in your mind and why you started your own practice.
Sure. So in 1998, I had been with a firm for a number of years and decided that it made sense for me to start my own practice. The reason I did that, the firm I was with was a good firm, but it was like many other matrimonial law firms and many other law firms in general. It was a really frenetic practice. I felt like a good portion of my time was being spent putting out fires. Quite frankly, we were often adjourning cases. Often the biggest goal of any given day was to get more time on that motion or the court appearance or the hearing that was coming up, because we never had time to get the work done. I was working very long hours, not making a lot of money, and worked for a gentleman who, remained near and dear to me, but because his life was so hectic, he felt strongly that, and the advice he would give us is, you guys are lawyers, this is what I'm paying you for, you figure it out. And in some ways that did me well, and taught me to learn on my own. But when I decided to start my own firm, I said, this isn't the best way to do things. And I was convinced, maybe with the hubris of being young, that I would do better. I thought I had a little bit of a business background. I had a business degree, and said, I'll run a better firm. I can do this better, and I'll make more money. So I started my own practice. And as often happens when we're good at what we do, when we're good technicians, my practice grew very quickly. And within a couple of years, I felt like I was right back in the situation that I had left, except it was mine. So I was making a little more money, or a lot more money, but I was incredibly overwhelmed. I was still working 6 and 7 days a week, 12 plus hours a day, and this was not what I set out to do. That was not my goal in life. So I knew that there was something wrong, and was searching for better ways to do things. So that brings me to in '98 when I start my own practice. In 2001 is when I am diagnosed with a chronic form of leukemia, of which I'm now cured. And I'll bring that up several times in the phone call just in case people jump in and out. It's important that that word is out there, that we don't send the wrong message. But so in 2001, I'm 34 years old. My wife is 7 months pregnant with our second child. I'm perfectly healthy. I'm very athletic at that point in my life. And in a random blood test, routine blood test, a friend, a doctor, notes that my white blood cell count is high. My wife was very concerned, having lost her father to cancer, and I thought, this is silly. Why do I need to have this checked out any further? But this friend insisted, and I went to a hematologist. And one Friday afternoon in April of 2001, I was sitting in an office, and a doctor not much older than me, with tears in his eyes, came out after looking at my results. We had bonded a little, and it turns out I ended up representing him shortly thereafter in his own divorce. But he shared with me that I had leukemia. It was a shock. It was, I couldn't have been more unexpected, very surreal. And the interesting thing about the type of leukemia that I had was that it was chronic. So it meant that I had a lot of time to think about it. I had a lot of time to live in fear, and I had a lot of time to plan. So there was a real benefit from that standpoint. So in '01, I learned this, and I'm told that nobody knows for certain, but probably within 5 years I would need treatment. And I started to think, gosh, a lot of planning to do. In '02, '03, I read an article in our State Bar newspaper about Atticus. And I read what they had to say, and I said, oh my God, this is exactly what I've been looking for. So in April of '03, I went to a 2-day seminar that they had offered in New York City at that time, and was blown away. And I said, gosh, what they're telling me, this is exactly what I need in my life. But at that point, I still, was young and maybe a little cocky in my own way. And so I pulled one of the principals aside that had been lecturing that day, and he was telling us at that point that we should stop working weekends. And not only should we stop working weekends, but once a month we should take a day off. And I said to myself, gosh, that sounds great. I'm working 6 and 7 days a week, but I had a little problem with it. So I pulled Mark Powers aside. I said, Mark, between you and I love what you're saying. I said, but my goal, I want to be one of the top matrimonial attorneys in my area. And you're telling me, that I should work less. And he looked at me very knowingly and smiled, and he said, James, let me ask you a question. If you write another letter, is that going to make you a better lawyer? He said, well, if you write another motion, will that improve your lawyering skills? And I said, of course not. At that point, I had done, countless numbers of both. He said to me, James, what if you had time to really think? What if you had time to strategize? What if you had time to really plan your day and plan how you're going to handle your cases? Do you think that would help? And I said, the light bulbs are going off. I said, gosh, that would be perfect. That would make a real difference in my life. And so in '03, I embarked on this, lifelong journey of really improving my practice for the sake of my clients, for the sake of my staff, for the sake of my family, and it's made a dramatic difference in my life.
Well,
Steve,
let me ask.
I can go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I can continue with the story, or you can jump in. You let me know.
No, it's really great. No, it's great. I've heard you talk about this quite a few times, and every time you talk about it, your passion comes out, your excitement comes out. But one of the things that I'd like you to talk about for just a moment is where were you at emotionally? You had been just terrified. I mean, you got a wife who's 7 months pregnant. You had to be terrified looking down the barrel of this disease. When you got diagnosed, I mean, most lawyers I know when they get diagnosed with something like this, are dealing with a health issue or a depression, which is rampant in our industry, or an addiction like alcoholism. They do everything they can to hide it, and they do everything they can to not tell it to their team, not tell it to their clients, not tell it to their referral sources. Where was your head at emotionally back in '03, '04 when you were wrestling with this?
So I will tell you the height of the fear and emotions came later. In '05, I started chemotherapy, and then in '07, I had a stem cell transplant. And in '07, when I relocated from New York to Boston, where I had the transplant with my wife, saying goodbye to my children, that was, the hardest point in that journey, not knowing, what might happen and whether I would come back or not. So, the level of fear and emotion, increased as the years passed, and I got closer to, what worked out, amazingly well, but we didn't have the benefit, of that foresight or this hindsight.
Everyone's a genius in hindsight. Yeah. Everyone can claim genius in hindsight. It's that horrible feeling of having courage to wade into something that's absolutely terrifying, that whether it's a change that life is handing you unsolicited, such as leukemia, or whether it's a proactive change that you're trying to put into place in your life because you see something better in your future that you want by putting in the change. So let's just talk for a moment, because you got the chemo, and the chemo didn't work, or how did we end up getting a stem cell? And talk to us about what that means. So those of us who have never had the horrible experience of going through this, what does that mean? What does it mean to you physically? What does it mean to your time in the office? I mean, what did that mean to you and to your practice at the time period?
Right. So good question. So when I started chemo in '05, we didn't know what it would mean, and there was a lot of pressure from diagnosis to that point to grow the firm. I was hoping that the firm would survive without me for what I had hoped would not be an extended period. The chemo, I was fairly fortunate, and I was able to go to the hospital in the morning for chemo, and I could be in court in the afternoon. It did have the desired effect of putting me into remission, but as my oncologist at the time had the foresight of knowing, the remission wouldn't last. And so in '06, really even before I started chemo, we started talking about the possibility of a stem cell transplant. Cell transplant.
Yeah, what does that mean?
So that's where they basically hit you very hard with chemo for 5 days to eradicate your stem cells. Your stem cells are the cells in your bone marrow that produce the blood cells, and they're the ones, when you have a blood cancer, that are the problem. They're producing bad blood cells. So their goal is to eradicate, or at least really knock down, the number of stem cells in your body, and then through a donor, they get somebody to donate stem cells, which is basically looks like a bag of blood, but it's It's somebody's actual stem cells, and they get poured into your body. And when things go right, they take over. So my stem cells, my blood, the DNA makeup is not the same as the rest of my body. And the problem with that procedure is that it's very risky, that it often doesn't work. People often don't survive, and people that do survive very often have lifelong problems because their body, with what's known as graft versus host disease, where their body really is attacking itself and these new cells. So I was told that there was a 1 out of 7 chance that this would go perfectly, which is how it went, and there was a 1 in 7 chance that I would not survive it, and then the remainder, was a varied degree of permanent, disabilities. So it was a pretty scary thing, we were put on notice Christmas of 2006 that this was the plan, and that at any time within 2 weeks they would have the donor ready. I'd have 2 weeks notice, and I would then relocate for what they thought would be at least 3 months to Boston from New York. The way things turned.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. So let me get this straight. So to, in essence, cure you, and this is the layman's approach to this, they actually had to kill your blood cells and replace your blood cells with a donor.
Yes,
and
in fact, right.
Yeah, so they had to kill the blood cells, replace them with a donor, and then they had to see if your body was going to take to the donation of somebody else's stem cells. And the consequences of this were either going to go exceptionally well, which obviously it did in hindsight, but you're sitting there going 1 in 7 chance of dying, not good. A couple other chances of things causing chronic and long-term disabilities, not good. These are pretty serious, compelling reasons to solve some stuff in your practice. What did you do to get ready? I mean, obviously the basic stuff, but at the time at the time you had one child where? Kindergarten? The other one 3rd grade?
Yes.
So where did Emma and Maggie go when you were getting the transplant in Boston?
So we were fortunate. My mother-in-law moved into our home. My brother-in-law and sister-in-law would come every weekend to spend time with our kids. And the timing of it was such, the way it worked out, although I was told over Christmas that we would be leaving, almost any day, we didn't leave until June. So it worked out well. We got the kids through school. The summer came, and family was available to step in and to help out.
Gotcha.
So so we should talk about leading up to that point, and then what happens when this occurs. When we leave in June, I check out of my practice, and at that point, my practice is not at all my concern, and I just I'm hoping to come home. So when I leave, we're well resigned to the very real possibility that the practice may not exist when I get back, and that we may not be able to afford our home, and we may end up in a family member's basement. And I'm grateful at that point that we have those options. And so I really do check out for an extended period. When I come back, I guess we're fast forwarding a little bit chronologically, but we don't miss a beat. And really, through a lot of planning that we'll touch on in this call, the practice survives. It doesn't expand during that time, but it doesn't decrease either. And I had been really the only, at that point I'm up to 3 lawyers, and I had been generating all the business. The other 2 attorneys generated, next to nothing. But I had time to plan. which is, I guess a crucial part of that experience. We don't always have that. I was fortunate in that I wasn't just pulled out one day, which happens to people, but I had lots of time to get my ducks in order. So when I came back, things had run very, very smoothly. We didn't, I earned money during that period, which I didn't anticipate. And when I finally got back into the office, I don't think it was until the following, at least March, when I was given permission to do everything, to go out and meet the public, because your immune system is completely compromised in the beginning and has to rebuild. So I didn't go, I'm in a litigation practice, and I didn't return to court until March. And then
So
things
you're almost out of court for what, a year then? You're like no going
almost,
to court
right,
for a year?
so from June through March, I'm
Yeah,
out of court, and I'm not seeing clients until I think in January of the following year on a very limited basis. I began meeting with people, and that was because of the fear of infection.
Yeah. So this is so I'm going to ask you a question in a moment. I want you to think about it, which is if what were like the three biggest strategies that you put in place to make that successful? Now, as you're thinking about that, I want everybody else who's attending the program or attending the webinar, listening to it later. Here you have a guy who gets diagnosed with leukemia, is going into a stem cell transplant because his oncologist is telling him, the chemo is not going to work. We're going to do it anyhow. It's not going to work. And he's thinking that if I survive this and my practice collapses, I'm going to be living in my, in my in-laws' basement and basically down the rest of my life. So he's going into tremendous terror. So I just want you to compare and contrast that. One of the reasons, and what you contrast it against, and I know this sounds trite to some people listening on the call, is one of the reasons that we recommend lawyers try and take time off, especially in our upper level programs, is to test the practice. Because to make sure it can handle operating without you, that your team's ready to handle operating without you. Because sometimes life doesn't give you the opportunity to plan. And so you can either have a reactive plan like, oh my God, how am I going to handle this terrible thing that happened? But in my experience, in my life, it was a loved one that had a terrible chronic condition, and I had to make some adjustments in my life. We've had lawyers that had a loved one severely injured due to a car accident. We've had a lot of really terrible things that we've seen because we have a massive client base. So we see a lot of terrible things. So when we try and encourage you to take time off, it's not just to have a great life and to have a great vacation and to enjoy yourself, which it's not a bad reason to take time off, but it's to get yourself, your team, your practice ready in case you're handed a challenge that you can't control or negotiate or mediate away. So as you listen to James, I want you to listen to the three strategies or the three recommendations that he has, that he put in place as a way of saying, wow, I could either do this from the perspective of I can take time off and spend it with people I love, or I can do this to be ready in case something terrible happens in my life. I would suggest the former rather than the latter, but lawyers are funny. We're funny creatures. Sometimes we can't tolerate too much joy and too much fun. We have to have suffering before we make change. So, James, tell me, what's the three recommendations or the three things that you put in place to make this so you came back, you're the biggest revenue producer, you're the biggest rainmaker, and the firm still made money while you were gone for 6 months and out of going to court for almost a year. How did you do it? What were the three big things you did?
So the crucial point, and this is really the last of the three things that I was able to accomplish, but the most important, or at least at that juncture of me stepping out, was putting together a great team. And without a great team, without staff and attorneys that I could count on, that couldn't have happened, and the firm would not have survived. And that's a long process, and I think that's one of the top things that really hurts most law firms. I know of so many firms that say to me, my secretary's terrible, but she's been here for 20 years, and we can't get rid of her or him. And so that's something that through systems, things that I've been taught through Atticus, through the various programs I've gone to and the coaches that I've worked with, I've always made sure that we have the best team possible, and we're very careful when we hire, and when we make a mistake in hiring, we let people go, and that's not an easy thing to do, but for the benefit of my clients and for the rest of the team members, I feel strongly that's my obligation. So clearly, I couldn't have stepped out, for that length of time if I didn't have a great team in place, a number of the people that are here, have been here, for many years. I have a paralegal who is going on 15 years, an office manager who's had her own share of healthcare crises, who's been with me for 12 years, and then, new people too. So putting a great team, getting a great team in place, not settling, just, but making sure that the people you get are excellent and that you train them well, and that they buy into what your core values are, your core values of your firm is crucial. So that's really for me point 3, and again I label it point 3 because it's kind of the last piece that I needed to accomplish. The other two points that I would say were crucial, time management. The first thing that I got, and the thing that made the most dramatic difference with my training, my education from Atticus, was time management. Again, in the beginning, in 2003 when I start with Atticus, I'm not taking time off. I'm having, a typical attorney life, making a little bit of money, spending at least everything I'm earning, and really not having a lot of downtime. And that's not where I wanted to be. One of the other memories I'll share briefly from that first 2-day seminar that I went to, we were asked by the person who was coaching the session to make a list of what we like to do in our free time. And I kind of, sheepishly looked around the room, and it didn't look like, any of us were writing. So I came up with a list of what I used to like to do. And they pointed out that, when you were in law school, whether, it was 5, 10, 20, 30 years ago, was that your goal? Is that how you pictured your life? When you decided to become a lawyer, that you would have nothing that you like doing in your free time? And so I was in desperate need of time management techniques. And, some of it's pretty basic stuff, but it's game changing. And so in my firm, we have a very pleasant atmosphere in my office, and people work very efficiently. There's not, we manage interruptions, we plan out our day, we, to the extent possible, and you can't fully control, probably any practice, and certainly not a litigation practice, you can't have full control over your day, but you can take back a lot of control. So the time management techniques was really my first and most valuable takeaway from my experiences with Atticus. But without those, I couldn't have done everything else. So without learning to manage my time, I could have never taken the time to find the right team members, to make sure that I'm, putting in good systems for hiring, to make sure that I'm putting in good systems for training them and for giving them feedback to help them to continue to grow. So time management was crucial. So that's the second point I would raise. And then the third point I would raise that was critical for me to be able to get to where I was able to leave for such a long time period was what Atticus refers to as killing the hero. One of the things that they impressed on me early on is that as lawyers, we take some sort of twisted pride, if I could, in doing everything. We're everything to everybody. So we need to do it all. We do it the best, and only I can do it. So the client comes to you, and you just want to take care of everything, and that makes it very hard to delegate. And so, and I see when I bring new lawyers on board or new paralegals on board, they've often come from firms where they're really uncomfortable delegating anything to anybody else, and that's because they never had a good team in place. They never had people that they could truly trust that they knew would do the job at least as good as them. And so in my firm, there's a lot of the work we do involves significant financial discovery, disclosure, digging through financial documents. A lot of that we have paralegals handle. We have paralegals handle that because they're really good at it, because they have the time to focus on it, and because I don't have to charge the client $500 an hour to do that, I can charge them $175 an hour. And so it's going to be done efficiently. It's going to be done, in a way that I'm confident they're going to catch at least what I would have caught, if not more, because we've had the time to train them. So, but to do that, you had to kill the hero. I had to recognize that I can't be everything to everybody, and I can do a better job if I get really good people in place, and if I can give them guidance and make sure that they have the benefit of everything that I've learned on how to manage my day, how to manage my time, how to manage my cases. So I would say those 3 points: time management, building a great team, killing the hero. Those 3 things, without those, I could not have gotten to the point where I could leave and successfully leave and return to a great practice.
That's brilliantly said. I'm going to just comment so I'm going to comment on each of those a little bit, just to put a little twist on each one to try and give people something to think about. While I'm doing that, I would like you to think about the following question. When you start to do this, when you start to get prepared, no, let me flip that around. I'm sorry, James. What I'd like you to think about and answer is, when you came back 1 year later, with all the changes that you made, all the delegations, the managing that you did, why did you not dive right back into being, the crazy lawyer that's working 6 days a week? So think about that, and while you think about that, I'm going to comment on one thing that you said and then come back to the answer. So as you guys are listening, so I'm trying to do 2 things here. I'm trying to, as a coach, consultant, a practitioner myself, a recovering litigator, I'm trying to highlight some of the things that James is saying so you can take this call and hopefully use it in your life. Number 1 that he talked about, and hopefully you heard him say it, was without making changes to how you focus and how you manage your time, you're not going to have room in your calendar to make any of the changes that he talked about. Number 2 is, when you think about killing the hero, this is a very slippery and sophisticated conversation. Some of you will get it instantly when he says it. Some of you will be like, I have no idea what he's talking about. But there's a mindset in certain practices on how you manage and how you view the world. And sometimes the heroic mindset is one that comes from a particular stage of growth inside a law firm. And that's where only you can be, as he says, the person that drafts, goes to court, and does everything else. And consequently, your thinking and your growth is trapped by the heroic mindset. And third, when he talks about building a great team, the effort and work that it takes to build an all-star team that's there for the duration is a lot greater than, in my perspective, that a lot of lawyers have done. They think if somebody can come to work and survive working there, then they're good enough. It really isn't that. If you're going to build a team where you can take 6 months off a year, there's not only talent there, there's recruiting there, there's management there, there's a tremendous amount of training there, there's a tremendous amount of coaching there. So I just want you guys to think about that as he's answering the question. So James, going back to the question, I just want to highlight a few of those things briefly. Brilliant job. Why did you not just say, okay, great, I've been cured. I've been out of the office for a year. Give me 100 files and give me the most complicated and interesting ones so I can bill a ton. Why didn't you do that?
Yes. So I'm laughing and thinking, are you kidding? And then I'm wondering, does everyone else on the call get that? Why wouldn't I go back to that lifestyle? Because my life is so much better. My practice is better. I mean, we take such pride in the work that we do for our clients. We really think we're, to the extent we can have an impact, we're having an impact. We're handling their cases efficiently in a caring way. We're not creating litigation unnecessarily, but when we have to litigate, when we are litigating, we're doing a great job for them. I have a really well-run practice that I'm really proud of, that my employees are all really proud to work at. If I take on the caseload that I used to have, that all goes away. That falls apart. If I don't have time to step back daily and really, run the practice, manage the practice, then the systems start to fall apart. So, and then I need to work a lot more. So, I mean, it's kind of, from my perspective, a no-brainer. I'm making more money. I'm working less hours. I'm having a lot more fun doing it. The results, are there. Where things are just, it's just been a better life for everybody across the board, that I can't imagine ever going back to that. And I hope, we recently brought in, I generally have very experienced lawyers here, but we brought in a newer, younger associate who's been practicing for 3 years, because we're now in a place where we feel that we can effectively train that person and bring her along and help mold her. I don't want that life for her. Do I think that, I now recognize that those crazy hours I was working as a young associate, I don't think that was beneficial in my career, or it certainly wasn't the best use of my time. And I think if I had the leadership that I'm hoping that I can offer to this associate and to other younger lawyers down the road, I think I could have really short-circuited a lot of the unnecessary suffering, angst, that traditionally goes with, growing up as a lawyer. It's just, this work is very stressful. In whatever area we practice in, it's very difficult, and there's no need to make it any worse or any more difficult than it is. And I think that by running our law firms in a poor way, which is how, I don't know how you could do it any other way if you're not getting, training and advice and coaching and being held accountable and, sticking with it. I just don't think it's possible how you could be, a good lawyer, as a full-time job. And then to run your firm, it's very hard to figure that out on your own. And I don't know anybody who, that comes to mind that I can think of that's been able to effectively do that. So to go back, I think, would be ludicrous, respectfully.
Yeah. You're so kind. You're saying Ed B. Lucas. Respectfully, Steve. I don't mean that you're an idiot, but respectfully speaking, I would not do that again.
Yeah.
So, that was great. So when you think about it, I should say, what would you, so there's a lot I heard there, and I'm trying to not dive in and swim around because there's a lot of really great thinking that you've done. What do you do today? I mean, you're the main rainmaker in the firm. Do you carry cases? Do you carry a caseload? What do you do today? So we know what was going on back in 06 and 08. Here we are 10 years later. What are you doing today?
So I have a very limited caseload. When I work on cases, it's because it interests me. I like the client. I like the adversary. But I try very hard to have very, very few cases that I'm the lead attorney on. Instead, the legal work I do is working with the other attorneys here. So we bounce things around. When we sell the client on the fact that they're hiring a team, it's true. And so whether the attorney has more or less experience than me in my office, we've all, had different experiences, with the cases that we've handled. And so we bounce things around. We brainstorm. We strategize. We make sure that we're not spinning our wheels and running up a fee unnecessarily. So I do a lot of that. So I'm working with the other lawyers here. But I'm also working, on the big picture. And on moving the firm forward in ways that I could have never dreamed possible, 12 years ago when I started on this path. So go ahead.
How do you handle it when a client says, but I want you to take my case. I only want you to work on my case. Only you, James. I want you to do all the emails and all the discovery and all the hearings, and I want only you to be doing the drafting. How do you handle that?
And quickly, gentlemen, if I could interject quickly, Steve, we've got about 15 minutes left in the hour. That's all.
Oh, okay, thank you, Jeff. We'll tell you what, we'll go about 5 minutes more on me asking questions, and then we'll give people that have questions the opportunity to ask James questions. And
so
go ahead.
I'm very clear with clients that it doesn't work that way, but I explained to them that they were referred to us for a reason. A lot of our work comes from either prior clients or from other lawyers. We represent a lot of lawyers, and I certainly will explain that to the client and say, you know, there's a reason you're here, and there's a reason that you were referred to us, and it's exactly because I'm not handling your case every step of the way that you were referred here, and that's why we can do a really great job for our clients. And it's my feeling that if an attorney is promising you that, either A, they're being disingenuous, or B, there is a potential, this is, I don't want to disparage other law firms, but I will explain, hey, this is how I do things, and this is why. So obviously I don't do a 45-minute webinar with them, but I do explain the concepts of what we're talking about and why I think that my firm is much more effective for them, exactly because I am not handling every aspect of their case, and I may not be handling any aspect of their case other than just being here to kind of be a sounding board and to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. So have we lost some cases over the years because of that? No doubt. No doubt we have lost cases, but my firm's grown every year. We just keep getting, we keep getting bigger by design. We're getting better cases, so we have, many clients that are worth, millions or tens of millions of dollars, which in the matrimonial world, is, can be, depending on your goals, that could be, a very healthy thing for the firm to have that type of client. So our reputation continues to grow. So even though I may have lost some cases, I'm getting a lot more, and I'm also, I get to pick and choose my clients, so we don't take every case that walks in the door, and we get clients that are aligned with what we think is important. So we don't, I avoid the clients that are incredibly unreasonable, that come in and that have goals that can't be fulfilled, whether or not they have the money to pay for it. We're just not interested in doing that. And it's worked out well, and we've never had a shortage of new business.
It's interesting. There's in a law practice, and this could be in any type of law practice, is about 100 what I consider strategic leverage points, that if you were able to improve or work on that leverage point, you will have a tremendous outcome for the owner. And the 3 leverage points that you mentioned, and so those of you that are following along on this, is first and foremost marketing. In order to pick and choose cases, you have to set the expectation and market consistently. 2, you have to select clients wisely. And there's no greater leverage point, I don't think, than learning how to set expectations and interview and create clarity around. When I was doing a high net worth estate planning, kind of in the same marketplace you're in from the family law perspective, that was probably the most important thing to do, was being able to clear and negotiate and set expectations with a high net worth individual. And then the third thing that you mentioned is pricing your services and pricing your services well. Those 3 leverage points can make such a huge difference for how you practice, and all 3 of those occur before the client comes in the door and signs the engagement letter. So a lot of lawyers are so focused on what happens after the client comes in the door. All 3 of those occur before. So James, I got one more question, and then Jeff, I'm going to let you have the opportunity to open it up to questions for anybody that would like to do that. And if they don't have questions, I have no less than 12 more that I could ask James. Why do you keep working and coaching and developing a practice? I mean, you clearly have made it. I mean, you're clearly at a point in your career where you're respected, you get referrals from other lawyers, you represent other lawyers, you're the go-to guy in your marketplace. Why do you keep getting on an airplane every quarter and going to some quarterly coaching program to continue to improve your practice. Why do you keep doing that?
So I touched on, I think, briefly before, the need to be held accountable. Like everybody else, it's easy in my life for days to turn into weeks, and to kind of get away from you and to get caught up in something, and suddenly it's November and I have a plan, and before you know it, the year's over and I haven't touched it. So what I have found is that by continuing with coaching in some form, it forces me to get things done. When I'm flying down to Florida every quarter to go to an Atticus meeting, I will feel like an idiot to myself, to my family, to my bookkeeper, who writes the checks, if I haven't accomplished anything. And so that forces me to get things done. In the years that I've been doing that, I will admit that more than once I've been on the plane down to Florida finishing a book that had been assigned the last quarter for us to read. Am I proud of that? No, but that's the reality of life, and and I get it done. And if I didn't have that meeting, I wouldn't get it done. And there are a lot of other goals that I'll set for myself at every quarterly meeting. I guess I could sit in my office and do that on my own, but the truth is I wouldn't do it. And if I have a meeting, I know that at the meeting or before the meeting, I'll set my goals for the next quarter. And then by the time the next meeting rolls around, I'm going to make sure that I had some of them done. And if I didn't have that meeting, if I wasn't jumping on a plane for a few hours, couple hours, and paying the airfare and the hotel, it wouldn't happen, and I wouldn't make the progress that I've made. So it really accelerates things in a way that I've been unable to do. Certainly in the 14 years, almost 14 years that I've been working with Atticus, there have been, I don't remember, but maybe like right after transplant, I didn't jump right back into coaching right away, and things don't happen. I just don't get done nearly as much as I would otherwise. So it's really helped me implement changes and really positive changes and accomplish things that I just know that I wouldn't otherwise have done.
Fantastic. Jeff, let's go ahead. If you have a question, there's two ways of doing it. Number one, you can go ahead and just raise your, click the little hand icon, and Jeff will unmute you, or you can go ahead and email Jeff with a question. And then Jeff, stay right there on that screen for me. And so while Jeff's looking and see if anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and submit those. If you're intrigued, because most of the people on this call are people that are considering working with our company and might be past clients of working with our company. If you're not sure what would be what next fit for you, my recommendation is take advantage of what Jeff said earlier in the call and take advantage of a practice growth diagnostic. It's a modest investment of $295, and it also includes a DISC profile, and the DISC profile allows us to talk to you about your strengths so that we can design a practice around what your natural strengths are, rather than kind of willy-nilly trying to learn on the fly. We really want to figure out how can we scientifically think through how to design a practice quickly, effectively, and add velocity for you, so that you can get the most out of your time in the practice. So Jeff, do you have any questions for James?
Currently, I don't see any questions, and I don't have any hands raised.
Terrific, terrific, terrific. So let's, as you move forward to the next slide, I like the what's next, I'm going to ask James another question. So, James, when you are delegating to your team and you are handing off significant portions of work, whether it's to a paralegal going through discovery or to an associate or to a partner working a case up, how do you hold them accountable in making sure that they deliver on their promises to your mutual client? How do you do that?
how do I hold them accountable? So, good question. The people here, I know that they care as much as I do. B, I know that if there's an issue, if they have a concern, a question, they'll come to me or to somebody else. Third, we do, anything, depending on what it is, but I'm thinking, agreements, motions, significant letters, everything is looked at by one other professional, whether it's another attorney or another lawyer. So we really do have, kind of two heads looking over things. When we're doing projects that are less related to the client but more related to the firm, we pick deadlines together. I have regular meetings, so I'm meeting on my calendar regularly with almost all the employees, not with my receptionist, and at a secretarial level doesn't involve me, but everybody else on the calendar. There's either, for the new associate, there's a daily meeting, so there's a 15-minute block of time where she can pop her head in. She doesn't always take advantage of it, but if there's something going on and she doesn't want to interrupt another lawyer, or she just needs a sounding board, I'm here. I have that with the paralegals. I have that with the the finance group, the office manager, the bookkeeper. So there's a lot of opportunity for people to get guidance and advice, and also and we do weekly file reviews. I mean, there's so many checks and balances that are in place that it's not a concern, because this is a team, and we work very hard to make sure that people remember they don't operate in a silo. They're part of a team, and because of that, we don't really have an issue with somebody running off on their own and us not knowing about it.
Got it.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's terrific. So hopefully you guys heard when you're listening to this that he's got a pretty good sophisticated management structure, to such an extent to having a 15-minute standing appointment so he's not interrupted by the young associate, to a structure to the week, everything from case reviews to financial reviews to case management meetings, to make sure things flow. So it's a proactive management structure rather than a reactive, oh my gosh, this is on fire, how do I fix it? Which is pretty much, if you think about how far you've gone, James, it's pretty remarkable, because the prior practice that you were at in '98, where adjournments and continuances were the norm, is because things were out of control. And in this case, you built a practice where things were in control, and it's not because you became a better lawyer. It's actually because you became a better leader and manager. And my experience is you could become a better lawyer and still have tons of continuances, tons of adjournments, and less success and productivity. It's actually your management skills over the past 10 to 15 years you probably had the most transformative change. So it's totally fascinating to listen to you talk about it, because I can hear things. Jeff,
Steve, if I could just jump in there with one parting comment. So that's so true, and couldn't have happened without all the training that I had. But if you're on this call, that may sound, like insurmountable, and that doesn't happen overnight. But the changes that I were able to implement after that first 2-day seminar were dramatic. And so while I'm in a place now that I could have never imagined possible 12 years ago, even 12 or 13 years ago, changes, we were implementing changes that were making a very real difference in my life and in the life of my firm and its clients.
Yeah, you start to build, they're like building blocks, like building a skyscraper. You start to put building blocks in place. And the funny thing about this, and a lot of lawyers don't get this, and I can say it to you and you'll totally understand, is if you're truly committed to really making an extremely great difference for your clients, one of the ways that you can do that is by running a really, really, really great firm and focusing on how to make the firm a phenomenally well-run process to provide the greatest care at a cost-effective or a price-effective point for the client. So it really, I mean, if you're really committed to taking the best care of your client, sometimes you're not the person to do that. You're not the person to, you're probably not the person to handle everything, because if you're tired and exhausted, you're probably not making the best judgment calls. So before we Yeah. So thank you. Before we close, there are upcoming webinars for the people on this webinar. I want to tell you that we've got the upcoming program. So January 12th, 2017, as some of you know, that we do this wonderful workshop a couple times a year called the Double Your Revenue Workshop. And we're going to interview a couple of people, or probably one person, on the secrets of how they doubled their law firm revenue, and that'll be January 12th at noon Eastern Time. And then we're going to do our next lessons learned by the Practice Growth Masters in February, so put that on your calendar. And then we're going to have a very interesting call for you in March 7th at noon, for Would Your Law Firm Pass the 4 Cornerstone Test, which is really the 4 cornerstones of practice growth. So those are upcoming webinars, and if you have the opportunity, go ahead and put them on our calendar. And Jeff, let's hit the next slide just briefly, and then I'll wrap it up for today. So upcoming programs. So some of you, I talked to you earlier about checking out the Practice Growth Diagnostic. If you're inspired or excited, you really rather jump in deeper and get moving quicker, I mentioned that we're doing the Double Your Revenue Workshop, and it's a one-day program. February 23rd and March 16th are going to be the next upcoming dates. The February 23rd will be in Orlando, Florida, and March 16th, 2017 will be in Los Angeles. So those are at the Atticus Advantage website if you'd like to go ahead and register for those. Those are terrific. I'm teaching one Friday that's already sold out, and it's, Thursday, already sold out. It's one of my favorite courses to teach. In this case, Mark Powers, the founder of our company, is teaching both of those, February 23rd and March 16th. And if you've got a chance to do a workshop with Mark, he's probably the highest paid coach in the country that focuses with lawyers. So if you've got a chance for a very modest investment to hang out with Mark for a day, do it. We have the upcoming new Practice Growth program. The January program sold out. So if you're interested in looking at kind of what James is doing and doing in a quarterly coaching program, you can go to you can email us at hello@atticusadvantage.com and get more information about that, and that's upcoming. But when you do that, make sure you add us to your contacts, because if you don't add us to your contacts, your spam filter will eat our email, and then you'll be annoyed with us because you don't get any emails from us. It doesn't mean that we don't love you, it just means that your spam system doesn't love us. So with that, Jeff, thank you for the great job you've done on the webinar, and James, thank you. Your continuous contribution by sharing your story is something that I'm always grateful for, and I know you have to get tired of telling it, but I have to tell you, every time you tell it, I get further inspired and amazed and blown away at the courage, and not only the courage to confront looking death in the face and going through a stem cell transplant, but, you know, getting your practice to a point where it works, quite frankly, without you or with your minimal involvement, and really, you know, making a difference for your wife and your kids, and just having a, you know, a really great practice that takes a heck of a difference. It makes a heck of a difference for your clients. So thank you for the work that you've done and the work that you continue to do. We're grateful for it. And with that, let's go ahead and call it a close for today. James, thank you again. Jeff, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I look forward to having you attend one of our next upcoming webinars. Happy holidays, everyone.